Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy Carroll. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Tech B2B Marketing, and welcome to this episode of the Manufacturing Matters podcast, where we discuss the trends and technologies reshaping the manufacturing industry and beyond today. So I've got the pleasure of being joined by Charlie Andersen and his colleague Shelby. Charlie is the co-founder and CEO of Burro. So I'd like to stop right now and ask you, Charlie, to kind of kick us off with an introduction to your background and a little bit about Burro and maybe what Shelby's doing there.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, so sitting here with Shelby, who leads all of our marketing efforts. Again, my name is Charlie Andersen. I grew up on a working fruit and vegetable farm, and my dad growing up had two businesses. One was our farm, one was a construction business, and I just grew up running machines. So think bulldozers, track loaders, tractors, skid loaders, et cetera. And literally from the time I could walk and talk, what I really loved doing was sitting in an air-conditioned bulldozer cab pushing buttons. And what I didn't like doing was getting out of that cab to do something by hand. So fast forward a bit, got an MBA and got out of business when I went to go work for a company called Fiat Industrial, which became Case New Holland. And what I saw there was that we loved building larger machines for our best customers. And there was an underserved portion of the market where there wasn't a lot of mechanization and there was a lot of need for autonomy. And so in 2017, I quit my day job, found a couple of co-founders of Terry. And since then, we have literally gone from 3 guys and a dog named Meg working out of an unheated barn to today we're a team of about 60 folks. And we've sold about 750 robots to date that drive about 110 days per day across the fleet. And just to describe what the product is, we build a robot called Burro, which is literally Disney's WALL-E or R2-D2 from Star Wars for work outdoors in a version 1.0 format, which is a small vehicle that drives near people in ag and industrial segments and does the 5 most basic, boring, ubiquitous tasks to be outdoors, which are hauling, towing, mowing, spraying, and patrolling or scouting. So that's us in perhaps 2 paragraphs, not in 2 sentences, as was originally reflected.
No, it's a really good background, and it's really inspiring. And when you mentioned robots from Disney and Star Wars, you were absolutely speaking my language, so I really appreciate that.
Love it.
So, Burro, in your short time as a company, you have spent a lot of time looking at how autonomous mobile robots can perform in really harsh outdoor environments. And now you're bringing this battle-tested physical AI, and that's a term I want to circle back to later. It's a really hot one in the industry right now, obviously, and it means a lot of different things to different people. But anyway, before we get into what that transition looks like, I wanted to go back in your start in agriculture and ask, like, specifically, what sort of problems did you set out to solve beyond kind of what you've already mentioned?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem that we have been tackling as a company, it's one part technical, one part user. It's how do you build how do you solve people working in conditions that they don't want to work in? And the weird thing is that a lot of the jobs to be done in the great outdoors that already have machines doing them are actually the cushier jobs. Like everyone wants to sit in the cab of a big Case Magnum tractor or a Case backhoe and like push buttons in air conditioning. Nobody wants to get out and dig a ditch or move grapes around 110-degree heat. Like no one wants to do that work. And building autonomy that can do that work that people do in the great outdoors is a lot harder than building autonomy that works on big machines, because when you work near people tend to work under canopies, so you can't always use GPS. And it's a lot more difficult to build vehicles that travel safely near people where all the labor is than it is to build vehicles that don't work near people. And so we started in some really, really niche areas of agriculture about 9 years ago, literally hauling fruit around in fields. And then as we got better and better and more capable, we started doing a bunch of towing of things. And now today we're about 2/3 ag, 1/3 industrials. And we have one system that can haul, tow, mow, spray, and patrol or scout safely near people across a ton of different operating environments, and anybody can run it. And that's been a very, it's no silver bullet kind of journey, a lot of lead ones basically to get it working.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I have a lot of different questions there based on that I want to ask about. Like, one is like, when are you going to be offering a household model? Sounds great. But as far as another good point too that you mentioned, I'm glad you did, is that these are jobs that people don't want to do, not robots replacing people, which has been, it's not, it's not totally an idea that has gone away, but I think people are starting to realize that robots now are being used for these jobs that people no longer want to do, or they're too dangerous or dull, or just, you know, they don't, whatever, for whatever reason, they don't want to do them. So I am glad that you mentioned that. But in terms of being able to, so like you said, it's different, right? Like an industrial robot that has been programmed to pick and place or whatever, or pick up car doors or whatever. These things are, it's a different level of learning and programming and like kind of understanding what the conditions, and of course there's safety fences in a lot of cases too, right? So what I'm getting at here is like farming environments are difficult. The terrain's uneven. It's cold, it's hot, it's wet, it's muddy. How did AI come into play when it came to building a robotic autonomy, and what do these conditions teach you about building robotic autonomy?
Yeah. I guess to tackle that relatively succinctly, do my best here. So most robotics companies have not been successful thus far for a long period of time, right? The only successes in autonomy thus far has mostly been in warehousing and factories. I think warehousing is about like 10 to 15% automated today, which is pretty small. If you think about it, it's like 10 to 15% of warehouses have robots today. That's kind of nutty if you think about it. It should be, much higher percentage. And that's one of the most penetrated segments. I think historically, robots have been a fusion of hardware and software. So like something that is doing a repetitive task away from people that's pretty simplified in a way. And new robotics, which is, I think, been coined with a very good term in my opinion, which is physical AI, it has 3 legs of the stool, not just 2. And those are hardware, software, and then training data or physical AI in some form. And the implications of that are that the bigger the fleet of robots you have, the more eyes on the world you see, the more you see, the smarter you become, and therefore the more you can do. And we as a company have reached a stage where with 750 robots turning on every day, I guess I typically say a spider has 8 eyes, I think. Is that right? I think the spider has 8 eyes. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Every burrow has 12 eyes. So every single day, every burrow turns on with 12 eyes. Each one processes 6 terabytes of data per hour per unit. And if one robot makes a mistake in a train depot yard in Australia somewhere, or in a airport in South America, or doing vegetation management alongside a road in Pennsylvania, the entire fleet learns from that lesson. And that's really, really accelerating and compounding. And so I think what we Burrow have learned is that if you start small and build a very data acquisitive platform, you eventually reach a stage where you can build something that's pretty generalizable. And that generalizability may start just around movement, but eventually it's going to be movement plus all the other stuff that people don't want to do outdoors. And then the final thing I'll allude to, you mentioned before the notion of people not, robots taking jobs, that whole realm. And to get it like a little bit weirdly personal and in a way that might sound a little bit intense, and I'm not intending it to sound intense, but my dad was like probably one of the most successful entrepreneurs I know personally, had a farm, had a construction business, and he grew up spraying. So he grew up spraying a lot of herbicide. He passed away at 66 because he was like spraying a lot of stuff that got him very sick. And I think that, today for me, we build robots that haul, tow, mow, spray, and patrol or scout. And there's not a single one of those particular jobs that people grow up dreaming they want to do. Like no one wants to sit on a mower all day long in high heat mowing. No one wants to spray herbicide all day long, whether they're in a vineyard or an airport. Nobody wants to be walking around in a depot yard at night scanning for thieves or trying to count things. So we tend to do jobs that nobody wants to do and nobody really aspires to do. And I think we're actually supercharging a workforce to do more and to do things that are fun, not boring and dangerous.
Absolutely, yeah, and I wouldn't say intense. It's incredibly poignant, and it makes your backstory that much more interesting and inspiring for me. I was going to ask you about the idea of how the field data that you acquire globally can make these robots smarter, but instead you sort of already answered that. But I just think it's interesting too because AI is such a hot topic for a lot of people. And in some cases, people are saying, well, you don't really need AI here. You don't really need AI there. Yeah. What you're describing here, you really need AI. And this is a real world proven, test case of like, here is how AI is making these things better, like by the minute. And I just think that's great because, a lot of times it's AI is almost hypothetical, and maybe we're moving a little bit past that now as it settles into becoming more of a regularly used technology. But again, just a really cool example for me.
Yeah, just to relate the AI stuff to kind of industrial uses specific, maybe like to make it less abstract and more specific. I think when people talk about AI right now, they tend to think a lot of like large language models and Gemini and Claude and all of those great tools.
Yeah.
And those are literally trained on the higher level thinking of human beings, right? Reading, writing, like all of humanity's knowledge that exists on the internet. And unfortunately, all of humanity's knowledge that exists on the internet doesn't include a lot of what does a Siemens train depot yard look like, or what does a Weyerhaeuser nursery or forestry nursery look like. It doesn't, like that data set doesn't actually exist. And so the challenge for autonomy companies is how do you build something that can work today and create value and also become smarter over time to do more things. And I think that there's a bunch of things, let's build a humanoid. And I think there are a lot of different ways that people are approaching it. The approach we have taken is build something that works and that creates value right now and ROI for users, and also something that over time becomes, the collaborative coworker of the 21st century. And I also think that, alluding to science fiction, to me, the robot that is Wall-E or R2-D2, that's a cool thing. Like that's going to be fun, right? And I also don't think it's one company. I think it's a platform, which is Burro, and that's an ecosystem of other companies building specific peripherals to count cars in a train depot yard, or to count inventory and replace a yard jockey, or to do it's multiple companies, and Burro is the layer for movement alongside people and a fully integrated stack that later will have an app store and a bunch of other functionality as well.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to ask about there in particular is, as you mentioned, the idea of it being a robot that can collaborate with people. And I know the term collaborative robot has been in a lot of discussions lately about whether or not robots are actually collaborative and what makes them collaborative and this and that. If I could ask you like a little bit, and I understand obviously you don't want to get in too deep on this, but I would be interested in knowing a little bit about those 12 eyes, the sensors that you have on board. So I'm assuming you've got like some time of flight, some laser rangefinder type things for working alongside people. But what other sensors do you have on there for not only navigation but for safety?
Yep. Yeah, totally. So each Burro robot has 12 cameras. I guess actually, let me describe this in more detail. We are in process on some new kind of exciting things to come. So everything I described is going to be current state, not necessarily what's ahead. A current product has got 12 cameras, 3D LiDAR, big NVIDIA GPU, big CPU, then bumper bars, emergency stops, what else? Speakers, a touchscreen, RTK GPS, at least 5 or 6 IMUs, so things for yaw, pitch, etc., as well as wheel encoders and a bunch of other. I think average robot has about 25 or 26 sensors and processes about 6 terabytes per hour per system. What those are designed, and then we practice what we call like this. I think it's what's typically called the Swiss cheese model of safety, which sounds less authoritative than it probably should as I'm saying it, but that's the principle of many layers of Swiss cheese need to have a whole aligned to have any sort of thing that's creating any risk whatsoever for a user. And so we go pretty slowly, like 1 meter per second, about 2 miles an hour, 2 to 3 on average. We have bumper bars on the front, which are for us like airbags on the front and the back. We've got a 3D LiDAR that sees out about 40 plus meters around the vehicle. And then we've got 6 cameras on the front and 6 cameras on the rear. And old robots or robots indoors can do some relatively basic things that once you go outdoors, you really can't do. So and I think that what is unique about us is we can go indoors to outdoors and back, or outdoors to indoors and back. And most robotics companies today that are really good at indoors can't go outdoors and vice versa. And what changes when you go, if you're indoors, if it's short or non-existent, you drive right over it. If it's tall, you stop for it. You can rely on things like tape on the ground. You can use 2D LiDAR to know where you are. Once you're outdoors, do you drive into a ditch? Well, it is free space, but you probably shouldn't drive into it. Do you drive through reflective water? Is it deep? Is it shallow? And so those are all, and then how do you localize? Sometimes you see the sky and you have good GPS, and other times you don't. And those are very, very, very difficult questions to answer if you need to do it day in, day out in a really, really boring way. And we have reached a stage where we are really boring in the most positive sense, because we have seen, I think at this point, more or less anything you could possibly imagine. Although as we're driving 110 days a day right now, we constantly uncover new random crazy things.
Well, that's a good thing. And what's really cool to me about that is, and anyone who has listened to the podcast before, I apologize because I say something similar to this so often, but it's true. And it's interesting to me personally is that like 8 or 10 years ago or so, I don't like your product would either be not quite possible or just way less capable because of all these advancements in different technologies like LiDAR. I don't think you could use LiDAR indoors, or it was prohibitively expensive X amount of years ago. 3D cameras were fairly expensive. GPUs are more affordable. And well, I don't know if they're more affordable, but more accessible than they were, more powerful than they were, which has kind of opened the doors to AI and the proliferation of 3D imaging. And it's just a really cool example to see all these technologies in one robot doing things that like really wasn't possible not that long ago. So it's cool to follow.
I think I got my first digital camera I think in like 1995. And I think that this space is very similar to digital camera from 1995, right? Like you push the shutter and it like, am I a pencil sharpener? Am I a microwave? Oh, I'm a camera. I need to take the picture. Like it's slow, it's laggy, it's low resolution. And we are right on the precipice of this unbelievable journey where stuff goes from 320 by 240 pixels to 80 megapixels and instantaneous, and you can see every single thing in high fidelity. And and where that's matriculating itself in mobile robots is robots are shifting from kind of dumb things working in warehousing and factories only to dynamic, flexible, AI-empowered, data acquisitive platforms that can go into the great outdoors and move, see everything, and eventually do manipulation type things. Mm-hmm. And so I think, today we are mostly movement today. We move around and then we look at some things and count them. And in the not so distant future, it'll be move around, look at things and count anything you want to possibly see, and a coworker you can talk to, and an ecosystem where if someone wants to go count some exotic specific thing, they can jump in and install another application by giving a Burro a voice command to count that then dynamic thing thereafter. And eventually you have something that is probably similar to a Disney WALL-E type thing where it's able to pick and place and move around in the great outdoors, which I just think is really exciting. And finally, that the voice with a large language model on a robot is just really, really cool. Like, hey, Burro, you stopped. Why'd you stop? Hey, go to bed. Hey, you were driving around last night. You see a car on site. What was their license plate? You saw a couple of faces. Who was on site? You can start doing all these weird things once you have a mobile vehicle with a big GPU and a lot of cameras on it. And the final thing I'll say, as an American or as someone in the US, like I don't love the premise of having a lot of vehicles running around in US agricultural and industrial sites that are not somewhat, Western oriented with respect to privacy and data and where stuff goes. And I think that there are, in my opinion, 4 great brands that do work outdoors, which are Deer, Cat, Bobcat, and Toro. And those are all animal brands across ag, construction, forestry, industrial, and so forth. And I think Burro is the autonomous animal brand for the 21st century that's obsessed with user privacy and how do you make AI empowering, not scary.
Oh, I love that. That's a great analogy. And yeah, I mean, I could totally see like at some point, like you're talking about, like it's feasible, and maybe there's not a particular use case for this with your customers, but you could see it, right? Like even using SWARE cameras or hyperspectral cameras to do like precision weeding if you needed to. And it's kind of like a lot of different things you could do, and it's really, really cool.
Hey everybody, I just want to take a quick second and thank our sponsor. Manufacturing Matters is sponsored by Tech B2B Marketing. They're a full-service public relations and marketing agency that focuses on technology companies, especially in the energy and automation markets. They provide full-service media relations, investor relations, employee relations, full end-to-end content development, video services, animation, full IT stack development from website integrating with ERP systems, CRM, marketing automation systems, and they bring a whole lot of knowledge and experience about technical markets since they've been servicing those markets for over 30 years. So if you have any questions, you want to learn more, go to techb2b.com. And now let's get back to the show.
So early on when you were first selling these robots, what are some of the applications that kind of helped push things forward? And were there any surprises? I guess maybe you talked about getting into industrial. Was that a bit of a surprise, or was it all part of the plan?
Yeah. Well, so the early on, we started literally as the most single purpose kind of dummy robot you could possibly imagine, which was a robot to haul around grapes and berries in a field. And the analogous thing I might point towards, if you're familiar with a Bobcat skid loader, you ever seen that product? They're like they're probably one of the most ubiquitous like outdoor ag, industrial, forestry, commercial products there really is, using construction a lot as well. That started out as a manure removal device for turkey barns. So like starts out super single purpose, but over time establishes effectively a standardized platform that can do anything in the great outdoors. And for us, we started very single purpose in vineyards and berries. And what we discovered over time is that if you just do one thing and you're indoors, in most cases when you're indoors, the scene is the same and the job to be done exists year round. Once you go outdoors, you've got winter, spring, summer, and fall. And so the seasons change. Oftentimes the job to be done changes. And if you only do one thing in the great outdoors, you can't be big because you can't be used year round. And so in 2020, 2021, we were growing pretty quickly, but then we had a bunch of customers trying to take these little robots and do things like towing and mowing and spraying and scouting. And we weren't quite big enough to do it. And so 2023 into 2024, we built a larger form factor robot, which we are now launching in an even more powerful format called Grande 44. And that is one robot that can do, that can haul, tow, mow, spray, patrol across all agricultural and industrial segments. And it really has evolved almost exclusively from like people pushing us beyond our limits of what we could accomplish, and us then building the solution that they needed.
And so you're in your, I wanted to talk about this because like a lot of this was leading up to me saying, I'm looking forward to seeing this robot at some point. You're going to be at Automate for the first time this year. Is that right?
Yep, it is for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Is there a chance that you'll be taking part in the AMR demo area, or is your robot too large for that, or are you not sure yet?
I should know the answer to that. If we can, we will and would love to. I should know that off the top of my head. I can't say I do. Shelby, do you know actually?
I believe it's something we're exploring. It is close to our booth, and if we're not there, you can just kind of walk, I think like 10 or 20 feet and find us. That's where our robot will be. But if we do have the opportunity to, we will be.
Yeah.
Well, either way, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it at some point. Hopefully it's there. And if it's not, like you're saying, like everyone can go and learn more about it. But that's not what I wanted to ask about. Like, being at your first Automate, launching this year, what makes this feel like the right moment for you guys to make this sort of expansion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I can't figure out how folks in the industrial segment are actually finding us, but it's like a third of our demand right now. And then I think externally we look like a farming robotics company, and we know it. And suddenly we have this platform that's a third industrial. And so how does Siemens and CSX and Weyerhaeuser and Carvana and Koch Industries, how do those types of guys find us? And those are just a couple of many. We don't quite understand it. And what we are being used increasingly to do is to replace small like Cushman tuggers and small Linda tuggers and other vehicles that are towing things around. We're pretty similar in terms of size to baggage handling equipment or baggage handling tuggers you'd see on the airport. We're roughly that size. And so you've got tons of industrial folks that are finding us to tow things indoors to outdoors and back, and also that are using us to scan inventory in depot yards and car lots, as well as to do vegetation management. And we don't know how folks are finding us, and therefore we've thought, let's go to the biggest show in the world where everyone is, to figure out why a third of our demand and a third of our fleet is suddenly in this space. And so it's been a pretty big surprise to us, candidly, how much interest we've had. And then I think Shelby has got incredibly high EQ around marketplaces, and so is helping leading the charge.
Yeah. To add to that, I think, like Charlie said, we have all these industrial contacts reaching out to us and saying, hey, we saw you on LinkedIn. We found your website. We think that your product could work in our operation. So from a marketing perspective, we're then tasked with, okay, let's look into this a little bit further. Where actually in the wide range of industrial operations can Burro work? And as we're trying to really grow into this industry and discover more and more that there are so many applications where our product can actually fit into industrial operations, let's go and actually meet these people. Let's go show them this amazing new product that we have coming, and let's let them play around with it and kind of really make a big break into this industry by attending this major show, meeting with major players, and starting to kind of tap into that market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
Going to fish where the fish are, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's kind of interesting too, Charlie, because you mentioned the idea of bobcats previously being used for like manure removal, but then I think about, the engineers and systems integrators and the folks that are in the industrial space are very, very smart and very resourceful, right? So you think of things like GPUs initially designed for gaming, or the Microsoft Kinect initially designed for gaming and being used for all these like way out of the initial intended use, instead of almost like these technologies have not sort of like GPUs are have certainly proliferated, and 3D imaging, I would argue that that's proliferated as well, and maybe that this type of robot is could be that next kind of thing, and it's really cool.
Yeah, that's something. One of my first jobs out of college, I was selling light bulbs, and the only reason I raised that is that I think when people see a light bulb, they associate the image of a light bulb with an idea. And what was really cool at the point in time where I was selling light bulbs, we were selling LEDs, and you're taking this object that people have a vision of it in their head for the past 120 years and reimagining it in a new way. And I think what's cool about robot is when you say robot, the definition of what a robot is so wide. Like, is it a robotic arm? Is it a Roomba? Is it a humanoid? And I think what we are creating as Burro today is the form factor that becomes Disney's WALL-E, which is an under 2,000 pound vehicle that drives safely near people, that does basic, boring, ubiquitous things, and that eventually becomes an ecosystem for automating all of the work done in the great outdoors that people no longer want to do. And I think that in the industrial space, from what we've seen, there's a heck of a lot of move around, look at something, pick it up, put it down, and what have you. And that ecosystem is what we are building today, armed with 110 days of drive. I think we've driven 120 years to date with a vehicle that processes a ton of data in every hour, and that is just making us really smart and capable as a fleet, maybe not as people, but as a fleet of going into industrials in a big way.
Yeah, and it's like when I hear more things like this, and you start to throw numbers out, and it makes me realize, like, we went to a Schneider Electric event last year. It's their Innovation Forum or Innovation Summit or something along those lines. And there were so many sessions on the importance of data centers, and like down to the point where people are talking about like innovations that have been made in cooling data centers. And these data centers are at the heart of AI growth, right? They're very important. And that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, it's interesting to see, and you see the growing importance of these data centers and the people that create and maintain and troubleshoot them as needed. But
Jimmy, I think one thing you might be hitting on there also is just some macro trends, or like some things that are actually driving maybe adoption and or headwinds on these things. I think so data centers, I think the AI boom is very real. You also have got like diesel's pretty expensive right now. Labor's pretty expensive. You have all these things that are getting more expensive as well. And I think what we can all see is that in 10 or 15 years, there's going to be autonomy pretty much everywhere. There's going to be a lot more things that are probably electric as opposed to fossil fuel powered. Labor, I think, is going to continue to get scarcer and more expensive, especially in hard to do jobs. And if your workforce doesn't evolve as things get more capable, then you're going to get wiped out as competition comes in that is more AI enabled and moves faster and does things at lower cost. And I think that for leaders of big companies and entities, how do you adopt automation, or how do you adopt things that can get you ahead of that curve, or with that curve pushing you in a positive direction, not the other way, which is how we kind of think about it as Burro.
Yeah, 100%. And like it's at the point where pretty much across every industry, and of course, like automation is not well, some forms of automation, but automation is not necessarily in automation in the form of physical hardware, robotics, not necessarily required in every industry, like in marketing, for example. But AI is, and all these companies that aren't adopting these technologies will eventually get left behind.
Yep. Yeah, that's certainly that's my opinion right now. I think that we in the, again, speaking a little bit as an American, not to get patriotic, but we as America, like we have a great opportunity today, and also it's an opportunity and also a threat. Like we need to modernize and kind of supercharge what we're doing in this country. I think when I've been in Asia recently, other parts of the world, like some other parts of the world are looking more modern than us, and I think that automation. And actually, if I think about like something like an Apple iPhone, right? iPhones are, I believe, 40% share of global smartphone revenue, but they are like 90% share of global smartphone gross margin. And that is an American company defining the category that becomes, the smartphone that we all use, and then embracing user privacy and everything else to deliver a great unified experience that everybody adopts. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that as physical AI meets work in the great outdoors, and as AI just generally does. And we as Americans need to, jump on it. And I'm not sure how much of your audience is American versus global. We as Western countries need to, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we recently interviewed Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, who is part of a bipartisan task force to introduce a robotics bill to help us remain globally competitive in, it's difficult with China, right? With their companies being government funded. But and the other idea too is that she had a lot of good insights, but one of the thoughts was like, it's great if we win the AI race, but then if we don't also innovate on the back end of things like data centers and we don't have food or water, what good is that? So there's like a lot of work to be done across the board, but she was all very excited, obviously, and optimistic about the increased adoption of automation and what it can do for our economy and reshoring and things like that. So yeah,
totally.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, there's tons of opportunity around it. So my great grandfather ran a horseshoe nail company in the 1920s, and kind of went insane because cars came out and things became pretty obsolete pretty quickly. I think we have the total opposite scenario here, where you've got this rising tide that is going to lift a lot of boats and make and breathe. I just breathe opportunity into a lot of industries. I think with physical AI in particular, any work that someone does in the great outdoors that requires moving, looking at things, and doing some sort of manipulation, like that can be automated, and likely a lot of it will over the next 5 to 10 years. And I just think that's a huge opportunity for many, many, many companies.
Yeah, Dr. Andrew Ng said AI is the new electricity. So at first you're not sure like how are you going to use these things, but eventually you will.
Totally.
And anyway, I'm curious. I want to ask you, like, what are those conversations like if you're typically used to talking to folks that are more in the outdoor, well, I guess some of these industrial companies are also outdoor, but more along the lines of like mowing and spraying, like you're talking about, like those conversations look a lot different than companies that are more like in the warehouse or dealing with, like you said earlier, like AGVs and AMRs that use magnetic tape and reflectors and fiducial markers and whatnot. Like how do those conversations differ between the industrial customers and like your traditional customers?
Yeah. So let me start first with like how they're common, and then I can kind of bridge to maybe how they're different. So I think what I've seen that's very common, for one, I find that there literally are always like 3 tiers of people, or 3 groups of people that you have to appeal to. First, you've got like people that are actually using things. In ag and a lot of the industrial space, if you don't speak Spanish, you can't talk with anybody of the actual end users of products. We have a Spanish-speaking customer success team, and I will talk with someone and be like, "Hey, how'd you like it?" They'll be like, "It's good." And then our field team will have like a 2-hour-long conversation and be playing fantasy football together, around like why the button's the wrong shade of red. So you got to appeal to that group. The people that actually use product need to love it. The second group I found is like the middle management team, the people that are actually like setting up the operational flow, the folks who are the first people to get called when something is broken or down or not working. If it's hard for those guys to set up, it doesn't work. I don't care where you are. If it's hard for those guys, it's dead. And then the final group is the kind of seniory I don't want to use the term muckety mucks, but you kind of get like the people with C in the title, who are, COO, CFO, CEO, who may have a vision for physical AI and ROI and return, but sometime may not be fully in the details. I'm saying this hopefully with enough self-awareness. I have this title also myself of it needs to work, it needs to have a payback, it needs to be in keeping with the overall vision for the company. We have found that in agricultural settings, we sell to like big corporates, think like Driscoll's, Wonderful, any Palm or Fuji Water, like that company. We sell to Costa Farms, Altman Plants. These are, $2 to $3 billion nurseries. So huge operations. Those types of sites have those three, C-suite, middle managers, and users, and you got to appeal to all three to get stuff working. And we found in the industrial segment, it's pretty similar. And what is unique to us is we actually tend to enter industrial stuff. And I'm think car lots, train depot yards, indoor, outdoor manufacturing, warehouse type settings. We tend to enter those spaces today through the line guys, through the people that are actually on the ground. Those are the people that are finding us the most. We're not talking with middle managers as much, and we're not talking with CFO, COO, CEOs today a whole lot. I think that arguably is a really good sign. That means that people on the ground are saying, hey, I got robots that work indoors. I don't have something that works indoors to outdoors and back. And I've got people doing these jobs they don't really want to do, or they don't want to do. And why can't we bring in automation like this? Because it exists in other sectors and we can pull it in. So that's what I would say is common. I think what's maybe different is I think in industrials, from like a product perspective, there are a couple of subtle things that people want. So at different, if you look at like Deere's product line or C&H's product line, the industrial stuff is always like yellow. So you can see it, like it's literally, you go from green or blue to yellow. So it's really visible. And then it tends to be slightly customized to be more functional in an industrial setting. And so we have an industrial version of our product line right now that is specifically customized to be safe near people, visible if you're backing up a forklift, and is set up for those specific uses. Just to give you some examples, I would say it's probably 90% common, 10% different. Not like the Venn diagram of crossover is actually quite significant.
Well, interesting. I mean, obviously it makes the expansion in this space a little more natural for you then, so that's good. Well, one thing I asked about early on was, and obviously we've both said the term a number of times since then, but physical AI, right? So it's a term that some people don't like because they think it's misleading, but there's been a lot of these terms over the years, right? Like embedded vision or whatever, that one comes to mind. But what does it mean to you? Like, to me, it means, well, I'll stop there. I'll see how do you describe physical AI?
Yeah. Well, maybe actually the first thing I'll say, I don't think the robotics community has been very good at marketing and branding historically. Like I think there are all these like funny terms. Like I think a lot of robotics companies use the term deployment. Like you deploy the military to Iraq. It's heavy, it's bureaucratic. Or when you have a robotics company, they talk about humans as opposed to people. There's just a lot of like awkward jargon that I think hasn't yet met its moment and is about to in a big way. Like I think we can build some great American brands right now that like ship stuff globally and get it. And get the like robots should be like fun, easy to use, companions, and all that good stuff. When I hear the term physical AI, I really think at its most elemental form means you can take a cheap camera and recognize anything. And to do that, you got to see a lot of it. And so the implications of that are enormous because it means that if you have a big workforce doing a lot of work outdoors, and if you can get robots to start working near them, those robots working near them can maybe start out with something basic, ubiquitous, and boring, and quickly do more and more things that people no longer want to do. And so I think that's the implication of it. And what we're doing is we're unshackling robots from the confines of not being able to work outside of like a cage box in a warehouse or a manufacturing element, and letting them go safely in a highly data acquisitive way into the great outdoors. And then finally, you may have alluded to this earlier in your question about ag versus industrials. Maybe the final thing is I think in a lot of the industrial stuff, there's a big element of security and privacy which I think is really, really wise and vibrant and the right thing to ask. Things like SOC 2 and, where is data going? And I think what we are going to confront is as cameras on mobile robots go from 1 megapixel to 2 to 3 to 5 to 50 and go from black and white to color, what you're going to have are vehicles driving in these settings that can recognize things better than you as a human being can do, and are able to pipe back novelty somewhere centrally to do more things. And if you're a operator in these spaces, you want robots on your site now to enable that future, and you want to get ahead of it. You don't want to be the laggard later down the road when all of your competition has it, welcomed in some form, in my opinion. Again, as a robot salesman, admittedly, so I don't mean to be pushing what we do.
That's really good. I mean, there's probably a million other questions I'd like to ask, but I'd like to be respectful of your time. Is there anything we haven't talked about, whether it's like, what you're excited about for Automate, or where you see this technology going in the next couple of years, or anything like this that we haven't talked about that you want to mention?
Yeah, the only thing I want to mention, so at Automate, we're gonna have this new robot we have called Grande 44. And I've been doing robots for 10 years at this point. And when I say doing robots, I mean like in the field with people running, like living and breathing the product. And this thing is like just a phenomenal piece of gear. It's a 44 horsepower vehicle, weighs about 1,500 pounds. The coworker of the 21st century. It is styled a little bit to look like Sid the Sloth from Ice Age, admittedly. So we're not taking ourselves too seriously. Hopefully that's clear. But it just is a really, really, really good piece of gear if you want to replace a small vehicle that is driving around doing boring work in an indoor, outdoor, industrial/ag setting. And so we're just really excited to talk about that. And then if you want to learn more about us, we're at burro.ai, and we'd love to share more for sure. And looking forward to being there. Really, really excited about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to learning more about it and hopefully seeing it. But at some point, I'm sure I'll find a way to see it. If anybody has any questions for Charlie or Shelby or the Burro team in general, feel free to reach out to us at manufacturing-matters.com. We'll be happy to pass those along. Or if you have general comments or questions for us or want to be on the show, please reach out and let us know. And other than that, Charlie and Shelby, thank you so much for the time. It's been a great pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Really appreciate it as well.